criticism develops within myself as a child, when even though I'm performing up to normal standards, my parents put pressure on me to perform at a higher standard, or they give me the cold shoulder, or they don't give me loving approval, or they don't give me a warm smile or approval when I am performing at school or at track and field or in my extracurricular activities or my sports. And therefore, a child can then develop, if the child is sensitive, as we spoke about before, a child who is emotionally sensitive or sensitive to antennae of different stimuli in the environment or from their parents, then that child can develop an inner, relentless, internal pressure that I need to be perfect in order to get my parents' approval. This is called pathological perfectionism, where and this causes an internal, relentless pressure within me to perform to meet the parents' standards. The ramifications of this internal pressure that I learn to criticize myself and say to myself, and this is now my responsibility. My parents did what they did, but now I took on in my own psyche an internal, relentless pressure to perform and to do well and to excel and to be the best in the class and best in track and best in ballet and best in all the endeavors in my sports that I do in order to get approval from my parents, which will never come, Nevertheless, that pressure causes me to have an internal emotional drive, which is unhealthy and pathological. It's an internal drive for pathological perfection. The body collapses under this kind of pressure. It collapses physically and emotionally under this crushing experience of having to live up to a standard which human beings are not normally held to. I feel tightness in my chest. I feel tense. I feel butterflies in my stomach. I feel a relentless drive within myself to perform. Now, I can become an overachiever because of this, and I can achieve a lot of things, but at what? Research has shown that the sense of self, the sense of identity, is found in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, here. Next to it is the reward center of the brain. It processes rewards, hope, and positive motivation, and that's called the striatum. And it is directly connected to the sense of self. So when I get rewards and I get motivation from positive feedback of parents, peers, and teachers, that feeds and is connected to the sense of self. Positive reward connected to sense of self, I get a positive sense of self. Not positive reward, negative reward, not perfect, not good enough, that leads to a sense of self, which is less than, not good enough. Now we've entered into the area of the biological, the bio-neurological dimensions of low self-esteem and not being good enough. It is centered in the brain. And therefore, my nurture, the way I'm treated by my parents, my peers, my teachers, cause a change in the neural pathways, which affects how I see myself. The striatum, the reward center, is connected to the self center. And if the rewards are not there, I'm not feeling good about myself or rewarded, then my sense of self is affected negatively. And I feel in my brain negative about myself, not good enough. I develop within myself this pathological drive for perfection. And then I feel physically tense, pressured, not good enough, driven, and it leads to a personality change, becoming irritable, angry, negative, and driven at all costs, where I might trample other people in my drive to get that kind of approval. And this is the biological, neurological dimension of low self-esteem and feeling not good enough. If this is true, and there is a biological foundation for feeling not good enough, then is it possible to change it? The answer is yes. Researchers have discovered something called neuroplasticity, which means that we can rewire the brain. The brain has neural pathways which are plastic, so to speak, and they can be rewired and changed by exercises, and we can rewire the brain through different kinds of exercises of how to think differently, and therefore rewire how we feel about ourselves. We think a certain way, we'll feel a certain way. We change the way we think about ourselves, we will feel differently, and we can calm down the pathological drive for perfection. So how do we do that? The prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking, reasoning part of the brain, it is the parenting part of the brain, has to talk to the striatum, the child part of the brain, which is the rewarded or the valued or devalued part of the brain. And because the striatum has been given negative feedback, it feeds the frontal cortex and tells it that it is not good enough. So the sense of self here is being controlled by the striatum's feedback that it gets from the environment. So we have to unwind or change the neural pathway by having the frontal cortex calm down the striatum. So we can call this part of the brain the parent part of the brain, and this part of the brain, the striatum, the child part of the brain. And let's imagine it like this. This is the parent part of the brain, the adult self. And within the adult self, we have a child who is then, let's say, 15 years old. And within that, there's a child who is 10 years old. And within that, there's a child who is 5 years old. So we have these different dimensions of self. We have an adult self. We have a 15-year-old self. We have a 10-year-old self. And we have a 5-year-old self. Now, if psychologically we do this exercise, and we have the adult self, the parent self, which is here in the prefrontal cortex, go back in time to the 5-year-old self. Imagine that you get into a time machine as a parent, as an adult, as a 35-year-old person, and you travel back in time. Imagine yourself getting younger, 30, 28, 20, 15, 12, 10, 8, 5. You go back to the 5-year-old self, and you walk into the house where this 5-year-old is operating, and he is told he is being a bad boy or a bad girl, or he is not performing well, or he is punished, or he's been sent to timeout, or he's told he's not doing well enough in school, and he's shamed or put down and humiliated. If you as an adult are receiving feedback from this striatum part of the self that you are not good enough, and you're being told to the prefrontal cortex that your sense of self is devalued, you're not good, you're not getting good rewards, and this part of the brain tells this part of the brain, the child part of the brain tells the adult part of the brain or the older part of the brain that you are not good enough, then we have to go back to the striatum and rewire the striatum. So the adult self goes back to the child self. The prefrontal cortex goes back to the striatum. The adult self, which is born naturally good, goes back to the feedback part of the brain, which says that I have negative feedback. I'm not good enough. I'm not performing well enough. I'm getting cold-shouldered by my parents. I'm being put down by peers. I'm being bullied. I'm no good. And that would send messages to the self part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, that you're not good enough. Go back as an adult now to the child self and ask that child, hi, I'm you. I'm you, only older. I'm 35, you're 5, and I've flown back in time to talk to you. I see that you're sad. I feel that you are being hurt. What's going on? Well, this part of me says, I'm not good enough. I'm just not a good boy. I'm a bad boy. The adult self, the prefrontal cortex, says to the striatum, what do you need from me? What would this part of you say? Stop for a moment, think about it, experience it. What does the 5-year-old self, who has been hurt, bullied, put down, cold-shouldered, told he's not good enough, not doing well enough, not as good as his sister, not as good as his peers, not doing well in school, being a bad boy. What do you need from me? I need love. I need acceptance. I need validation. I need to know that I'm okay. Take the child by the hand, take him out of that house, put him within yourself, in here. Take him outside. Take him on a trip in your time machine to the present and show him where you're at right now. Show him your workplace, show him your friends, show him your pickup football game, show him your volleyball game, show him your friends, show him your laughter playing parcheesi and checkers and chess and your activities. Show him your friends. Hang out with him over here in the present. Until now, this child self, has been bringing the adult self back in time and has dragged him down, saying, you're no good. The striatum has said to the prefrontal cortex, you're not good enough. I want you to go back to the striatum, go back to the child self as an adult. Bring him with you to the present and tell him all the good that you're accomplishing. Tell him what the positives that you're accomplishing as an adult. What are you doing well? What are the good friendships you have? What are the successes in work or in school? What are your fun times? What are your fun extracurricular activities? Bring him into the present and show him the good about yourself and start to rewire him. And I want you to try to do this for 60 seconds every day. Go back in time from your adult self to your child self. Go and get yourself one of these babushka dolls online. They're called nestling dolls for $6 online. Or make one yourself and go back in time and go back to the moments. Think of the moments where you were put down and hurt, whether you were 5 or 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 or 18 or 25 or yesterday. Go back to that child, go back to the striatum, go back to that child self who was getting negative feedback. Bring him with you to the present with your time machine and bring him to the positive moments of your life. Rewire, reprogram this child, reprogram your striatum, and restore your sense of inner value that you are good enough. Be aware that your mind has been wired to think negatively about itself through the neural pathway of the striatum connecting with the prefrontal cortex. Rewire it through this exercise. Do it a number of times. Do it 10 times over the next 2 weeks. And that way, retrain your brain to realize that you are good enough. You are successful at certain things. And focus on the positives. Focus on the good in yourself. And then rewire that negativity by saying, you are good enough. This is called rewiring the inner self through healing the inner child.